Okay, so new poll question. Poll workers in Maryland get extensive training to identify and stop potential security threats on election day. True or false? So when we say potential security threats, we're thinking about cyber, physical, and insider threats. So do they get extensive training? True or false? Okay, the answer in terms of the entire state right now is actually false. Anne Arundel County, the answer would be true. And why is that different? Is basically for the stuff we're doing here at Towson. So what we've done is we want to make sure poll workers don't become that insider threat. And like I said, we don't want them making mistakes that could cause a problem. And with elections, we want to make sure that there aren't any problems at all. If I order from Macy's, we'll pick on Macy's again. If I order from Macy's and they send me the wrong, let's say I order a navy blue t-shirt and they mail me a yellow t-shirt or a gold t-shirt. That's a mistake. They sent me the wrong color, but I can send it back to Macy's and they could just send me another one and fix the problem. Can't really do that with elections. We have this one shot to get it right. And if we don't get it right, then people sometimes may not have confidence in the process. And we want to make sure that everybody, we have a fair winner and a fair choice at the end, and that there is no questions about the legitimacy of the process. And that's a fundamental tenet of our democracy, is to make sure that our elections are fair and free. So what we did at Towson is we worked with Harford County and Anne Arundel County in Maryland to create this training. And every single election judge, so an election judge is just a fancy name for a poll worker in Maryland, will take our online training, and they're going to learn about cyber, physical, and insider threats and things that could go wrong in an election. And then they're going to read about it in the training, and they're going to take some quiz questions. And when they pass all the quiz questions and get them all correct, then they get a certificate, and we have an understanding that they learned about cyber. Now, we did a lot of training and we did a lot of testing of our training, and we found with a huge statistical analysis process that poll workers actually do learn about threat, and their knowledge is improved by interacting with our training. So this is good. They can do this, they can learn and become more informed and hopefully prevent cyber, physical, and insider threats at a polling place. And if something would happen, they should be able to recognize that something bad is happening and either fix it themselves right away or call somebody to help them fix it. So the goal is to make sure we stop threat at the source and we don't turn it into a big problem. And we also don't turn it in, we also don't find out about it, 3, 4, 5 days later. We find out about it at the source, fix it the day of the election so it doesn't become a problem. Okay, so what about COVID-19? So, I kind of chuckled here a little bit because COVID-19 has changed everything, right? If you're a student, you might be in the classroom right now, but most likely you're doing this at home, and everything has changed. And our original plan before this pandemic started was to just train as many poll workers as we could throughout the entire state of Maryland for the election. And we are training all poll workers in Anne Arundel County with our training, but we wanted it to be in every state, every county in the state. And then the pandemic happened and everything changed. And really, just running the election became the question. How do we make sure people just have access to vote in the middle of a pandemic? So what we were seeing in the primary elections were crowding, lines, very bad things. You do not want people in big crowds in a pandemic. Sick poll workers. So in Detroit, Maryland, the day of their election, their primary election back in March, all these poll workers, a whole group of them just called out sick. They all had pneumonia. And this was about less than a week before the first official COVID case was diagnosed in Michigan, but you have all of these poll workers with pneumonia, right? And pneumonia is a potential side effect of COVID. So who knows what was happening? But the point is there was very, very sick people and they couldn't work, so they dropped out. And poll workers, if you're not having poll workers, you can't run the election. And we need access. We can't have inadvertent voter suppression. We can't have it to be too difficult for people to get to the polls because it's an election. They have a right to vote and they should be able to exercise that. So what we started looking at with COVID-19 was, basically mail-based voting, and that's what the country started moving to. So one of our questions here, another poll question, is when was mail voting first used in the United States for an election? So go ahead and take your guess. The correct answer is actually the Civil War was the first time mail-based voting was used in the United States. So in this example, lots of people actually got that correct. So it's been used in quite some time, and it's been used successfully basically since the Civil War. We've never had a huge issue with mail-based voting. So before I get into that in more detail, let's talk about the second poll question here. How many states use mail voting for a majority of their votes in 2016? So that means at least 50% of the people who voted in the election, at least 50% of them voted by mail. How many states? All right. The answer here is actually 7. So 7 states used a form of mail-based voting to cast most of their votes in 2016. So 3 states only use mail-based voting, and this has been before the 2020 election. They have been doing this for a long time. Oregon has been voting by mail only with no polling places since 1998. Washington, Seattle, the Pacific Northwest, Colorado, Washington since 2011, Colorado since 2013. And then in those 3 states, plus Arizona, California, Montana, and Utah, we saw a majority, at least 50% of the electorate who participated in the election used mail-based voting in 2016. And we don't have evidence that mail-based voting causes, issues. And the really cool thing about mail-based voting is that we tend to find out when there's a problem. So for example, let's say I requested a mail ballot in Maryland. I filled it out, I sent it back in. And then I think, I want to vote twice. Why not? So I show up at the polling place. And some people literally forget that they voted, so they go to the polling place. There are flags in the system. So the polling place is not going to let me vote. They're going to say, you know what? You already turned your ballot in. We got it. Sorry. Now, let's say I got my mail-based ballot in the mail and I spilled coffee all over it. And now I can't use it, right? It's ruined. There's coffee. It's stained. I go to the polling place on election day. Say, you know what? I got this mail ballot, but it's stained. I'm not going to be able to use it. In that case, they'll let you vote something called provisional. And you cast a ballot there, and it's not counted until they verify your mail ballot never came back. So let's say you throw your mail ballot out, it's a mess, it's ruined, you never return it. Okay, then they'll count your in-person provisional vote. Or if you end up filling it out somehow and, I don't know, staining and getting the coffee out of it, and you turn it in, then your provisional vote does not count. You only get to vote once. So there's lots of different checks and balances in the process. And a lot of states actually use voting by mail before this election. But the big question in this election was, how do you scale it up and make every state be able to use it on a wide scale in a really short amount of time? We found out there was issues in March, and now we're having an election in November. So the nice thing about mail-based voting is that it adds what we call complexity. And it makes it harder for an adversary to infiltrate. So if somebody actually wanted to change votes or steal votes, when you vote by mail, you're not just going to a polling place where everybody goes. You're using drop boxes. You're using the regular US postal mailboxes. For someone to infiltrate the election, they would have to steal ballots out of every single post office box, every single drop box across the whole country. There's thousands of postal service mailboxes, probably tens of thousands in a state. There's 287 drop boxes in Maryland. It's not going to happen. They're going to get caught. So it makes it actually harder for someone to infiltrate because the votes are spread out in all of these locations. They're not centralized in one polling place or on one server. So how do we come to that conclusion? Well, we did a lot of research to look at the probabilities of things being attacked and how difficult that could be. But we also looked at who was targeted in 2016. Now, earlier in the talk, I said those 21 states were targeted in 2016. Homeland Security admitted to that. We looked at those 21 states and we identified from those states who was targeted and who was not targeted, and who was using standardized equipment and non-standardized equipment. So standardized equipment would be every county in the state uses the same thing. So for example, everybody's using those scanning machines, or everybody is using those credit card machines. Non-standardized equipment means some counties are using scanning machines, some counties are using credit card machines. It changes. What we found was that less of the targeted, more of the states that were not targeted, the 65% number, were the ones who are not using standardized equipment. Because it's harder to target that state. They have to breach 2 types of equipment. If they're using 4 different types of voting equipment, they have to break into 4 systems in order to target that state. If a state is using standardized equipment, they only need to break into 1 system in order to have an effect into that state. So the adversary, whoever that is, if it's a foreign actor or a person or whatever, is less incentivized, and it's harder for them to break into more things. And it's the same idea with mail-based voting. It's more drop boxes, it's more mailboxes, it's a lot harder.